Hello everybody and welcome to another One Piece chapter review. In this case, it's for chapter 982. This chapter takes us all around Onigashima Island in snippets that follow the Tobi Roppo primarily. Judging from this chapter, I think it's a pretty safe thing to say that we're going to see some transformations very, very soon. We're going to find out what prehistoric devil fruit power at least one of these characters has. Looking at the cover page, I'm assuming that Gotti had no problems with Lola's request to marry him, so he probably agreed, because he is carrying her bridal style out of there. I also like how little baby Pez is being carried by Capone, who's being carried by Chiffon, and you actually don't notice him very well, but in the background, you see Vito there sticking out his tongue, and it almost seems like he was caught in the explosion. I really want to find out more about the Marines that are attacking them, especially who's leading the unit. And I definitely see this attack as a way for these characters to run into Pound and the Tontada somewhere down the line. So I see this attack as a way of the family running into each other so that they can leave Dressrosa. Now before I go on, I just want to put this bit of map-related information out there. Do you guys remember how there was one chapter that was calling Kinemon's forces, Kinemon's like the chunk of the army that was going right, it called them the Eastern forces, and then it called Denjiro's forces that were going left the Southern forces? It was pretty confusing at first, and I even asked, wait, shouldn't Denjiro's unit be called the Western forces because they're going left? But now we know why, and we got a compass in the previous chapter that served to clarify this point. So the reason for why Denjiro's unit is called the Southern forces is because Onigashima is in the southeast. So whenever we see the front of the island, you're facing it from a southeast position. So if you go to the sides, one side is east, but then the other one is south. So that's why Denjiro's unit is called the Southern Forces, and that's what the armies are doing. In fact, we learn in this chapter that Denjiro's unit is doing the exact same type of pincer move tactic that Kinemon's unit is doing, which is basically that you have the group split in two, and one part of the group keeps going forward while the other one breaks apart and starts heading into the Dome of the Skull. There's a couple of pretty interesting character threads that I've been noticing in this arc that get explored further in this chapter. And one of them, the first one is actually Kaido's. When we see Kanjiro arrive with Momonosuke all beat up, we get this panel at the bottom of the page with Momonosuke all beat up, and then immediately after, we see a panel of Kaido frowning, completely displeased with what he's seeing, to the point where even Kanjiro has to assure him that Momonosuke is alive, right? That he's just beat up. Because he probably wants Momonosuke to give him information about Laugh Tale, even though Momonosuke doesn't have that information. And then Kaido thinks back on the scene before the time jump where he was disappointed that Momonosuke was Oden's son because he didn't live up to the hype. And then Orochi has the stupid idea to hold a public execution crucifixion thing for Momonosuke, just like he did with Yasui. And by the way, in that panel where Orochi talks about staging the execution, we see the section where Queen is, and you can tell there are some pole dancers there to keep things funky. No, but the reason for why I think the execution is a stupid idea for Orochi to have is because usually when we've seen executions go down, what you're doing is you're concentrating everybody's attention in one place so that something major can happen. Like we've seen this with Roger, we've seen it with Ace. Yasui's execution as well caused Zoro and Sanji's reunion. And so I think there's enough buildup here where we've seen Kaido not take Momonosuke seriously at all. And so because of Momonosuke's character arc, I guarantee that by the time Kaido gets defeated, if not before that, Momonosuke is going to prove Kaido wrong about him being disappointing. And then Kaido's going to be like, oh, I underestimated this kid. And so I think holding a public execution, even though it's a dumb idea for Orochi, it would be a great opportunity for Momonosuke to show that even though he is thinking right now about possibly getting rescued, that he can play a role in rescuing himself. And so one of the things that I can see happening here in the execution is to have Momonosuke awaken King's Haki. You know, because Oden had it, his father had it, and so maybe he can awaken it in a similar situation like Dofi awakened his. And then later on, not in the execution, not in this moment, but maybe later on, I was thinking about this, like, you know how Shirahoshi in Fishman Island, she was able to call on the Sea Kings to help? Couldn't Momonosuke later on technically summon and command Tsunisha to show up if he wanted to, and have the elephant fight for the Alliance? But regardless of that, like, whatever it is, Momonosuke has to do something to prove Kaido wrong. That much is certain, right? And so I think it's also one of the reasons for why we have all those theories floating around about Momonosuke
possibly being connected to one of the ancient weapons. Because you have all this buildup that it has to lead to something big. Otherwise, there's no narrative payoff for Momonosuke being mistreated and doubted.
To the point where I would not be surprised if later on, because of Kaido's code, Kaido's code is really strong, right? Remember what happened with Higurashi, where she interfered in the fight between Oden and Kaido, and then Kaido killed her? Because deep down, Kaido secretly has this desire of wanting to be shown that people can be strong, right? I think that something similar could go down in this situation where he gets tired of Orochi, he gets tired of Kanjiro, and he wants to kill them, because of his code. Or maybe it's not even Kaido, maybe it's the people of Wano that have grown tired of the Kurozumi clan and they want to kill Orochi and Kanjiro. And so Momonosuke, I guarantee, I can totally see this happen. Momonosuke stands in front of them and he's like, no, we can't kill more Kurozumi members. We've already mistreated them. There's a history of prejudice. We can't keep doing this. We have to change things for the better. Tell me that doesn't sound like the ending of a One Piece arc. So yeah, I definitely think that Momonosuke is going to end up having a Kobe/Vivi moment. Although personally, I hope it's more of a Shirahoshi moment where she uses her power so that her words pack a stronger punch. Now, according to the official translation, Kanjiro says that the beast pirates that mistook him for an enemy and attacked him, he actually ended their lives. So he's been going around killing beast pirates. And then he apologizes to Orochi over the Kinemon situation because in all the years of knowing him, he never imagined that Kinemon would be this brilliant strategist, even though we as the readers know that the plan only worked because of a fluke. I do think it's important to remember that Kanjiro left the alliance before Jinbei showed up. So according to him, he has no knowledge of how far the alliance has actually advanced.
Fukurokuju shows up to offer Kaido and Orochi a false sense of security by saying that there haven't been any enemy ships or boats spotted at Onigashima, and of course they wouldn't be able to see them because the Alliance decided to sink their ships as they made landfall. And so basically, the only threat that Orochi and Kaido are aware of right now are the 4 symbiote supernovas with sharp teeth that are trying to ruin Appu's gig as a DJ. There are a whole lot of Wano matchups that are still up in the air about whether or not they're actually going to happen. But one of the few that we can count on for sure, I think, is Fukurokuju versus Raizo. I think that one is pretty much guaranteed because we learned a while back that the two of them were rivals as ninja.
We actually get to see Fukurokuju in this chapter drop down from the ceiling like a ninja. I thought it was a nice touch. I also think this is the first time that we've heard what Killer's epithet is. Turns out it's Murder Machine Killer. Pretty fitting. I also thought Black Maria's behavior in this chapter was interesting because not only does she refuse to go and search for Yamato, therefore also refusing an opportunity to challenge one of the calamities, but she's acting pretty flirty in the beginning of the chapter with Kaido. Well, she's actually acting like a courtesan would, right? Most of the time we've seen courtesans act really flirty and stuff. It's because they have a hidden agenda. And so from this chapter, I don't get antagonist vibes from her yet. And it's not just her. There are some behaviors from other members of the Tobi Roppo that caught my attention that kind of point towards them not being completely sold or in sync with Orochi's ideals. So I'll start with Black Maria. So the first thing she does that caught my attention is she takes Momonosuke in her hands and she says, oh, the poor little boy, you've beaten him bloody, showing some concern and empathy for him, right? And then when Orochi grabs Momonosuke from her, she's shocked, I'm gonna say almost disgusted, but mainly shocked. You see her reaction in that panel and she's like, ugh, you crazy, disgusting creep. I also thought it was interesting how she was very interested in getting Orochi to drink something in this chapter. So here, have this, I wonder what's in there.
And speaking of Black Maria, last chapter I was really focused on analyzing her headquarters, the pleasure hall, to see if I could find hints about what her devil fruit power was. And so I was so focused on that I didn't notice the most obvious hint of them all, which is that Who's Who's crew has a cat theme to it. And so that probably means that Who's Who's prehistoric Zoan devil fruit power is that of the saber-toothed tiger. It was so obvious, it was right in front of me. I can't believe I missed that. And so I also think that's one of the reasons for why we don't get to see Sasaki's crew in this chapter. Because if we saw his crew, that would also give us hints to what his devil fruit power is. So instead we find out that he essentially did the same thing that Who's Who did, which is that he sent his men or his crew to go look for Yamato.
So again, from the Tobi Roppo, we have Black Maria, who's acting a little bit sketchy, showing empathy for Momonosuke. We have Who's who is actively trying to challenge and take down one of the top Yonko commanders of the Beast Pirates. We have Sasaki, who is also doing the same thing. He sent out his men to try and find Yamato so that he can find a way of taking one of the top Yonko commanders down. And also, when he gets cuffed, by the way, I hope those cuffs are Kaido Seki. I hope they're sea stone. But when we see Denjiro's mountain of a neck, and we have the Kozuki family crest tattoo, and he says, "Do you know much about the history of Wano?" Did anyone else get the impression that Denjiro was going to educate Sasaki? Like, maybe reveal some of the history that Sasaki doesn't know of. Like, for example, like, let me tell you something, Sasaki. Let me tell you about how well this country treated fishmen before Lord Oden. And so you can think about that. I'm going to head out, but you sit there and you think about this. And I'm pretty sure that Sasaki's going to burst out of those chains if he's not cuffed with Kaido Seki. Like, maybe he's a Tyrannosaurus Rex and his little hands are so small that he can just slip right through the cuffs. No, but anyway, he's still trying to take down one of Kaido's commanders. And then we have Drake, who we know is going to betray Kaido. And then by the end of the chapter, Ulti runs into Luffy. And one thing that we know about Luffy is that he can make allies out of pretty much virtually anyone. And wasn't Ulti already complaining about Kaido calling them in for them to solve a family issue? I remember, like, during her introduction, she was like, "Another family issue? Man, what is Kaido doing?" So if you were to tell me that somewhere down the line, in the middle of all this, some of the Tobi Roppo members end up changing sides, I would not be too surprised.
Now, the way the whole Marco message scene plays out in this chapter, I don't know about you, but I got the impression that Oda had initially planned Marco to tell Nekomamushi something pretty important, and then he changed his mind about what the message was midway. Because maybe he thought, on second thought, maybe I can't have Marco or Nekomamushi be the one to deliver this news or this bit of information. Like, if you consider the way that this whole thing was set up, which is with Marco telling Nekomamushi, "Hey, if you're going to Wano and going to see Straw Hat, please, give him this message." It is narratively disappointing to think that the original message that Oda intended, or that Marco intended for Nekomamushi to pass to Luffy, was the one that we got in this chapter. I just don't believe that this message was the message that Oda initially intended on Marco passing along, because think about, like, all the things that Marco could speak about. Like, think about all the possibilities of the info that Marco could have shared. He could have talked about Bakans or Weevil or the remaining Whitebeard pirates. He could have talked about the location of the fourth poneglyph. He could have talked about like a secret about Blackbeard, or maybe even something about rocks that Whitebeard shared with him at some point. And I'm not saying that Marco's message should have had all of those things. No, just one of those things, right? And so I think that maybe Oda had second thoughts and he was like, maybe I won't reveal that information this soon.
Like, in the chapter, Marco even tells Nekomamushi, "What was the point of me even giving you that message in the first place," right? So it does seem like there was a change or a mistake. It might have been better if Marco had not said anything in the first place. Like, the only thing that would serve to justify that message, narratively speaking, would be if we learn more about the reason for why Marco was thinking about being late in the first place. Like, if we find out more about what business he needed to take care of. I'm assuming it involved Weevil. So if we get to learn more about that later on, then I think that would work. It's interesting that he says that, so that little island over there by itself is being called Onigashima now. I'm kind of curious what it was being called before, when he was in Wano with Whitebeard. I'm assuming the island could have had the name of whoever the skull belongs to. Like, maybe this is the resting place of the famous giant warrior, continent polar blank. We get a little bit of a silhouette there at the end with Neko and Marco, and it seems like it's the end of some robes or a dress. And so I think it's Izo. I think it's Izo, and I think Oda changed his design And so he's keeping that a secret. And Izo says, like, I'm surprised you're getting involved, Marco. And Marco says, well, you know, I love Oden, but I had no idea that something like this was going on. So that pretty much explains a question that I had during the Oden flashback, which is why Whitebeard did not get involved in Wano and stopped Kaido. Is because he didn't know. And I'm guessing that by the time Kaido became a Yonko, Oden was already dead. So it doesn't explain why Whitebeard never went to Wano to confront Kaido, but it explains why Oden died under Kaido's rule. Like, think about this. Yonko are known internationally, right? Like, they're known globally. Like, people know their names and they know where they're from. So if you were Whitebeard and you were reading the paper and it said, Yonko Kaido, or Kaido becomes a Yonko and he rules over Wano, like, wouldn't you be like, whoa, like, wasn't that Oden's territory? What's going on there? Maybe I should, you know, go visit. And then that scene ends with either Nekomamushi or Izo saying, then let's hurry. I have a genius plan in mind. I really wonder what that plan is, because according to law, what he explains in this chapter, there's only one way that a normal ship can approach and get into Onigashima, right? Which is through the front entrance, because, you know, around the back, it's just full of whirlpools and currents and stuff. And so that got me to think about Enies Lobby.
How, like, the Gates of Justice have these whirlpools spinning in front of them. And so Sanji needed to get into a special hidden room to pull a lever to be able to close the gates so that the Marines would get stuck in those currents. So I wonder if Onigashima has a special type of room as well, where you have to, you know, pull a lever or deactivate those currents so that other ships can approach the island in a different way.
So maybe that's what Law is thinking of doing, deactivating the currents so that Marco and Nekomamushi can get there via a different path. Although technically speaking, if you already have people on the island, like an ally like Drake, like, they could be the one to deactivate it.
Turns out that Usopp attempted to shoot Big Mom with the brachio tank. Now, obviously, it doesn't do anything to her. And you have that panel of her chasing them as they're heading in reverse, which is actually, it's kind of fun because I actually said that would happen in the previous review.
And just to reiterate what I said briefly, I do think that Chopper and Usopp have the capacity to either sway Big Mom or talk their way out of this situation.
I do think, though, that the panel does require a little bit of suspension of disbelief in the sense that we know what Big Mom can do. So I think, given what we know, given her feats, I think it should be relatively easy for her to catch up with the brachio tank and tear it up. But because the scene is pretty comedic, your mind just kind of goes with it. And speaking of this, like, if they keep going in reverse, wouldn't that lead them directly to Jinbei and Robin? And so they would have to run away as well.
Anyway, we cut to the girls, they're running away, and we see Prometheus. And Nami's tool thing begins vibrating. Did Usopp know what he was building?
One of the things we know about Zeus and Prometheus is that they can't be dealt with normally, right? Like, at one point in Whole Cake Island, Luffy tried punching Prometheus with armament hockey, and it didn't do anything to him. And so from what we've seen of Zeus and Prometheus, we know that you have to deal with them based on elemental typing. Because Brook was able to injure the fire with an ice attack, and then also Jinbei was able to hurt it as well with a water spear attack. And then Nami was able to take control over Zeus by feeding it thundercloud treats.
Now, as far as we know, Nami doesn't have little fireball treats that she can feed Prometheus to take control of him that way. But then I thought about Big Mom's Vivre card. Does Nami still have a piece of it, or was that lost? Because I remember also that, like, Napoleon, Zeus, and Prometheus, they're a special type of homie, right? So I don't know, does the Vivre card work on them? I can't remember. All I remember is that those three are special because they have a piece of Big Mom's soul in them. And then also at one point, Nami had the Vivre card, but because the homies were so close to Big Mom, the Vivre card wasn't working. Because Big Mom's soul supersedes whatever bit of soul is embedded onto the Vivre card. Then I thought about Kinemon, because we know that Kinemon can cut fire, but Kinemon is headed in the opposite direction almost. And then I thought, wait a minute, where is Sanji? Because he uses fire. And so I don't know where he is. I don't know which route he decided to take, but it could be a situation similar to the one that happened in Punk Hazard, where Tashigi had lost her voice, right? And Virgo was there, and Tashigi was crying, but she couldn't speak. But Sanji's observation haki was so good that it was able to detect a tear from Tashiki's face falling onto the floor, and that's how he shows up. So maybe if he can sense that the girls are in danger, he can show up that way and fight Prometheus. Fire versus fire. He might even get a power-up that way, in the same way that Nami got a power-up with Zeus. Like maybe Sanji clashing with Prometheus boosts up the heat of his own fire, or something like that. So not exactly the same way as Nami, you know, but maybe it has an effect on Sanji's fire. Unless Nami can find a way of dealing with Prometheus. And again, I do suspect that the Vivri card might come back up. The chapter ends with Ulti, best member of the Tobi Roppo aside from Drake, in my opinion. And she's trying to get a ride from her brother, Page One. I think it's pretty fair to say that Ulti is a pretty well-liked character amongst the fandom. I think she was liked almost immediately by a lot of people. And I made this connection, and I don't know if you agree with it, but I do think there is something to it. So here you go.
Don't you think that Ulti kind of looks a little bit like Hinata? Like, look at this picture of Hinata, right? Now put some horns and a mask on her. Boom. Like, even her clothing kind of resembles a little bit of what Hinata would wear. So I don't think it's too far off to say that they're kind of similar physically, not personality-wise, but design-wise, physically. There is something about the two characters that, in my mind, they kind of like, you know, echo each other. There's a lot of really good curves in the right places for everybody to like both Ulti and Hinata. Just the best of both worlds. Now this is kind of a stretch, but I also find it interesting how Ulti has this thing about wanting to be carried. And so I really hope that she's a Velociraptor because, again, I think it suits her personality very well. But also the fact that she wants to be carried reminds me a lot of that Velociraptor type tendency that I've seen in movies where they tend to jump onto their prey or onto bigger predators.
That was Ulti's figure right there. No, but anyway, Ulti and Luffy, two very likable characters, end up meeting up by the end of the chapter. What could possibly happen? Are they going to fight? Are they going to bicker? I'm assuming a little bit of both. I do expect at least one of the Tobi Roppo to reveal the transformation in the next chapter. It's going to be interesting to see what the dynamic is between Ulti and Luffy. Luffy is well known to turn girls that he meets into fangirls of him. So I hope that Oda takes a different approach, slightly different approach. But we'll see what happens. It's pretty interesting. I never envisioned that these two characters would cross paths like this so soon. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Overall, I thought the chapter was okay. I mean, it's a setup chapter, right? You have like different snippets setting different things up. So I think the seeds that have been planted here are going to blossom pretty soon. So I'm excited for that. Thanks again. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Take care, and I'll catch you guys later. Be safe. Bye.